This is Jonah Dempsey, your host of the Human Design Deconditioning Guide. Today I'm going to talk about the 5-1 and the 5-2 profile, and more generally about fifth lines. So you can extrapolate this if you're a 2-5 or a 3-5, and also just if you have fifth lines in your chart, which most people do. Anywhere that you have a fifth line in your chart, it's going to be where people are projecting on you, as well as where you're projecting a certain quality of yourself outward. So projection has a double meaning here. There's psychological projection, which is the classic meaning, where you say, I'll give an example of that. Psychological projection, first of all, people use it erroneously. They use the term psychological projection to mean anytime someone sees something in the other person. But that's not what it means. It means when you see something in the other person that nobody else sees. And in that case, what you attribute to them is actually misattributed. That is projection. You're projecting a quality onto them they do not possess. So, an example from the classic example from Marie-Louise von Franz, the great Jungian analyst, is a person is telling all their friends that their new romantic partner is a good singer. And then the friends listen, and the person's not actually a good singer. That's projection. But if the person actually is a good singer, it's not projection, right? So we don't just want to say that anytime you see something in the other person, it's automatically projection. It's only when you see something in the other person that's not actually there. Okay, so that's the one meaning where projection is, if you're a fifth line, people are then projecting on you. And I'll talk about in a minute what exactly they're projecting on you. But there's another sense of projection too. There's projection like when you're in a play and you're on stage and you project your voice, or however it is. I don't really know how to do it, but you project with your diaphragm. There's projection where you are actually projecting out into the world. You're projecting an image of yourself out into the world. And so this is also what the fifth line does. The fifth line puts an image of itself that it wants the other to see out into the world. So then the other goes, wow, this person is very XYZ, whatever the XYZ is. And I'll get to that. So the fifth line is doing both. I've heard people in fifth line groups and stuff, 5-1s and 5-2s, complain, no, everyone's projecting on me. Well, you're also projecting a certain image of yourself outward. Okay, so there's 64 gates in the I Ching, 64 hexagrams, which in human design we call gates. And in these 64 gates, each of them has a fifth line. So in some sense, it's like there's 64 fifth lines, but really you can also think of it as like 64 variations of the fifth line. Really, it's not that there's 6 variations of each gate, it's that there's 64 variations of each line, if I can put it that way. There's 64 takes on the first line, 64 takes on the second line, and so on. So these 64 variations. Sorry, it's so bright out here. I'm trying to check something. These 64 variations are going to have certain commonalities. They're going to have a certain continuity, so that if you're a 5-1 or a 5-2, you're going to understand all 64 of these. Not as much if you're a 2-5 or a 3-5, because it's unconscious and it works differently at the design level. It's not the same thing. You might recognize parts of it, but it's going to be different. But it still might be useful to you, right? It still might be useful to recognize how this is happening without you realizing it, and how it's happening unconsciously and it's happening automatically, and you structurally cannot be aware of it. It's like, it still might be useful. It's not going to be the same thing. I've heard 2-5s and 3-5s tell me, oh, I'm aware of all the projections people put on me. No, you're not. It's structurally impossible. It's the unconscious. You can't be aware of that. You're not aware of all of the, expectations people put on you. The 5-1s and the 5-2s are. They're hyper aware of them. But that's the difference, right? So when it's the unconscious line, it's something that happens to you automatically that you can't really notice until after it's happened. So it's not that the 2-5s and the 3-5s don't know the expectations. They eventually do. It's just after it's too late. The 3-5 goes, why would you expect that from me? 3 months later. Whereas the 5-1 knew from day one that's what the other person expected. You see a 2-5 or a 3-5 go, hey, you told me that you didn't expect this of me. Well, a 5-1 or a 5-2 knows it doesn't matter what the person says they expect. The 5-1 or the 5-2 has to know what the other person expects, disregarding what they say, right? That's why the 5-1 and the 5-2 are so paranoid. They're so paranoid all the time because they're constantly on alert, distrusting what the other person says. The other person says, it's okay, you can do this, you can tell me that, whatever. And the 5-1 or the 5-2, part of them knows that as soon as they do it, they're going to get crucified. They're going to get rejected. Not even rejected. 5-1 doesn't care about rejection. More like attacked. Chased out of town with a pitchfork. Burned at the stake. All that kind of stuff. So we know that the fifth line has to do with projections. And this is still going to be useful for 2-5s and 3-5s. I don't want to say it's not. It's just that it's different. That's all I'm saying. It's different. If you're a 5-1 or a 5-2, it's very, very different because you have that conscious fifth line. Not like a 2-5 or a 3-5 where you have an unconscious fifth line, where you're not really aware of what others expect of you. Okay, so we know that the fifth line has to do with expectation. Well, the other thing is, it's kind of the ideal of each hexagram. It's the ideal of the hexagram. So I'm continually surprised the more I dig into the Rave I Ching, which is all 384 lines of the I Ching in detail, right? And what you should do, if you're a fifth line, if you're a 5-1 or a 5-2, get a copy of the Rave I Ching, or even better, the Rave I Ching Line Companion. The Line Companion's even better because it has a page or so for each line. It really goes into detail about each line. And read the fifth lines. Read all the fifth lines. Just like if you want to learn what the hexagrams are about, go through and read all the first lines. Just skip through first line to the next, the next, the next. You will learn what every hexagram is about. Because the first line of each hexagram is about what is it really. The first line of a hexagram is going to be investigating what that really is. But the fifth line is so fascinating because it's what people expect from it at its best. At its best, it's what people expect from the hexagram as an ideal. So I'll just give you an example. My association for hexagram 19 is flirtation in order to elicit resources from others. It's a tribal gate, and it's basically about flirting to get the other person to show you their wealth, to show you their fancy car, to try to impress you with their material resources. I know that makes it sound really shallow, but I witnessed it the other day. I know someone whose son is on gate 19, and she's very flirtatious, and she was flirting with this trust fund guy, and sure enough, he comes to pick her up in a fancy car, and he takes her to a fancy house that he's house sitting for his parents who are on vacation or whatever, and he's doing all this demonstration of material wealth, which is the gate 49. That's where jealousy comes from, by the way. That's where being possessive comes from. The 1949 is a tribal possessive channel. And if you know anybody who has the 1949, notice how jealous you get when you're around them. They might not notice their own jealousy, but they sure as heck make everybody else jealous. Not necessarily of them, but just in general. They just bring out jealousy and possessiveness in others. And there's positive aspects too. I'm not making any value judgment here. But in any case, so you look at 19 and you go, okay, so 19 is about, this kind of tribal thing of trying to get somebody else to show you their material wealth, to demonstrate it to you. And you go, well, what's the fifth line of that then? Like, what would the fifth line be? What's the best, the ideal? Well, the fifth line is the line of sacrifice. In this case, the 19.5, the fifth line of gate 19, is somebody who is expected to do things for free. They're expected to be a savior. They're expected to make sacrifices. They're expected to, they're basically, the fifth line of gate 19 is expected to do all this work for free for the tribe. They're expected to, it's the opposite of what the normal gate 19 is, where it's somebody who tries to elicit the resources from the tribe. This is the other way around. So when you read the fifth lines, you really find out that it's all about the expectation placed on it, which is to be the best example of what that gate is about. So the lines are really fascinating. I just want to, as an aside here, if you're studying the lines of the gates, the other thing you can do is you can walk the wheel. You can go around the wheel. So I'm sure you're familiar with the wheel. The wheel is the sequence of hexagrams that make up the rave mandala. And what you're doing is you're basically going around from one gate to the next, but you can read the first line of the gate to understand what it's about. And it's great if you can read all of them, sure. But it's enough if you just read the first line of that gate, then you read the sixth line. Because the first line is what it's all about. And so that's telling you what that gate is really all about. And then the sixth line is saying, yeah, but that's not enough. You actually need something else. It's not enough to just have this. What you need is the next gate. So I'll just give a short example. Okay. Let me make sure I get this right. Okay, gate 16, and I owe this entirely to Simon Jurjavchik, by the way. Simon Jurjavchik is this really, really great quad right emo manifester. Really just, he's taught me so much. And so let me see if I get this right. It's been a long time since I've done it. I think this is his example. So if I'm wrong, I'll put it in the comments. But you can do this yourself. This is really just for you to do. You look at gate 16. So what is gate 16 really about? Gate 16 is about skills. Now let's see. I'm gonna have to edit this.